Hello fellow programmers, welcome back. This is episode 2 of the batch programming tutorial series. If you haven't watched the first episode, I strongly recommend you do so. Now let's get back to the set command. The set command has two optional switches, which is the A switch and the B switch. Let's go over the B switch first. The set/p command stands for input. This value is the variable which input will be saved to, and this is the string that will be displayed. If we run this, it asks us to input something. We can actually run the set command without an assignment or an equal sign to display all values starting with the string we specified here. So for example, if we type set processor, it'll list out these default variables, which in this case show information about my processor. Now let's say we want to check if this input contains something, but before we do so, keep in mind if we enter nothing, the value will actually not change. It will be set to what it was set to previously. So if we type set input, it's still test. Now let's say we want to check if this value is equal to hello, and we want to check that with case insensitivity mode, so we use if and the I switch. So this is a simple if statement that checks if input is hello. Now let's say we want to execute more commands if this condition is true. To do that, we use parentheses, like this. So now if we run this program and we input hello, it's gonna tell us hello. But now, what if we input a quote? Well, this will happen. The syntax of the command is incorrect. You might already know why this happened. It's because of expansion again. Like I said, this expands to directly what we inputted. So that looks like some illegal syntax. Now, how can we avoid this? We'll talk about that in a minute. Now we're going over the set command. Let's say we want to make a simple calculator. To do that, we get input here. We use set with the A switch. The A switch stands for Arithmetics. So we're gonna run the help page for set, and here we already see it. Now let's scroll up here. The A switch specifies that the string to the right of the equal sign is a numerical expression that is evaluated. As we can see, we can set result. If we put input here, that's gonna calculate whatever we input. Now of course, this right here is extremely unsafe, because if you don't know, there are special characters that we're also going to go over later. So if we input something illegal like this, it is going to crash. And that's because, once again, it's expanding to directly what we're inputting. And to avoid this problem, we're of course going to use quotes. And lastly, we want to echo that result. Let's run this again. Let's input 1 plus 1, and here we have a simple calculator. Now let's say we input an illegal equation. That's gonna tell us it's a missing operand, and it's actually not going to change the result. You see, when we run these batch scripts, we're changing these values and then we're exiting, but these values remain. So if we type set input, you can see input is what we inputted here. Same for result, and we can echo that as well. Now another thing we can do is run multiple arithmetic equations in a single line. See? We can also do things like this, which sets both of these values to 1 plus 1. And lastly, we can actually use variables in set/a's without having to expand them with percentage signs. and we can see that it is going to output that x is 1 and result is x plus 1, which is 2. Now keep in mind, there are no data types in batch. Here we can set x to a string which just contains 1, and we can also actually do set/a x plus equals 1, which just adds 1. We can do the same with a minus, we can do the same with division, multiplication, whatever. So yeah, keep that in mind. Everything in batch is a string. This is not gonna output anything because I didn't tell it to. Now let's say we want to have a calculator or just a program into which we can input an arithmetic equation, and if the result of that calculation is, for example, 10, do something, otherwise do something else. We first run, of course, set/p to get the input. Optionally, we can also undefine input like this, so that if the user enters nothing, it actually enters nothing or 0. Secondly, we calculate this equation. Then we use an if statement. And lastly, this is how we can use else statements in batch. And that's it. Let's input 5 plus 6, which is 11. The result of the equation is not 10. The result of the equation is 10. Now this is where something gets interesting. Let's say that if the result of that equation is 10, we also want to get some more input, like making another equation. Well, our instinct might be running set/p again and getting input. But then when we calculate the result and try to echo the result, something interesting happens. Here we can enter 10. The result of the equation is 10 and it lets us continue. But then when we enter something like 15 plus 6, it tells us 10 again. You see, in batch, since variables expand to directly what's inside of them, we can also do weird things like this, like set test to a closing bracket, and then we can do stuff like this. And this actually works. Since test expands to a closing bracket, this expands to a closing bracket. But what the problem is, when you change a value while you're in parentheses, it cannot possibly update since it was already parsed beforehand. And since the last result must have been 10, this will always display 10 regardless our input here. And that's why Windows NT improved batch a lot. It introduced delayed expansion. Delayed expansion opens us up to variables that are enclosed with exclamation marks. To enable this feature, we run the command setlocal enableDelayedExpansion. Also keep in mind, once we exit this batch file, any values that we've changed here from now on are going to be reverted when we exit back to the command prompt. This is because we're using setlocal, which begins localization of environment changes in a batch file. This pretty much means that if we set test to 1, run setlocal, set test to 2, and end local, the value test is going to revert back to 1. So now that we have enabled delayed expansion, we can replace these variables with exclamation marks. But now we have a new issue. You see these exclamation marks here? Since these work differently now, we have to escape them. And you might be thinking, cool, we just put a caret here. Well no, we have to put 2 carets here. That's because we want to use the exclamation mark in quotes too. So when it's in quotes, we only use 1 caret. When it's not in quotes, we use 2 carets. Oh. My bad, I mistyped it. Let's input 10. The result of the equation is 10, and now if we enter 1 plus 1, it is going to return 2. And that's the introduction to delayed expansion. And another cool thing about delayed expansion is it works very differently because it's expanded after parsing, so we can technically remove these quotes here and it will be just as safe. Same here. And that also solves the issue with quotes being entered, because now even if you enter a quote into the input, that quote is technically going to become a double quote. That is everything I have for this video. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.